Welcome to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm Jeremy Mickla. I'm joined by co-host David Berner, as always. And we're excited today to welcome back as our first ever repeat guest on the podcast. And Matt Miller, we're excited to have you here. Believe it or not, when David and I have kind of been doing the podcast thing for a couple of years, but we kind of did more like tutorial style things and less conversations with people. And so when we kind of started to add those into, the collaborations that we have, you got to be our first guest. And that was almost exactly a year ago. And so we're bringing you back because, I've heard a few things may have happened over the course of the past year. So, you want to give us a little bit quick of, like an update of what you've been up to in the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody who didn't hear the first episode, I'm Matt Miller, the author of Ditch That Textbook and several other books. And I've been, it's been an interesting year. I think I think we were talking about artificial intelligence in the last episode. And, at that point, my book, AI for Educators, had been out for a little while. And since then, I've published another book called AI Literacy in Any Class. There's all of this talk about AI literacy and, how are we going to teach it and how's it going to work and everything. And so, my book is very focused on, how does that actually fit into a regular classroom that has content to cover and curriculum to deal with and all of that stuff. And since then, I've also picked up a teaching job. So I'm teaching one class of high school Spanish a day in person. If you're watching the video, then you see me sitting at my teacher desk right now. So I've been doing that, and that's been really nice to, sort of stay connected and grounded and to get to see students every single day and, deal with the sort of like the creative struggle of trying to engage them every day and everything. But, still sending out my email newsletters and publishing things to the blog and social media and doing presentations at schools and conferences and all of that stuff. And, so if I'm ever on the road doing that stuff, I just send my kids down to the library and they do sub plans like they would with anybody else who misses school. But it's been a busy year since we talked last.
Yeah, so all of these different things you got going on: classroom teacher, consultant, speaker, blogger, newsletter, extraordinaire writer, and all of these different things. So really, like, how many AI agents do you really have working for you?
Probably not enough. I probably should try to get more of them to do all of that stuff. I do a lot of brainstorming with AI. I actually do it a lot of times when I'm out on a run. So I'm a runner and I run on my county roads in very rural West Central Indiana. And so I've got my headphones in and I'll just pull up ChatGPT and I'll voice type to it. And then once it generates the response, I'll hit the little speaker button so that it'll speak it out to me. And it's almost like having a personalized podcast. Sorry, I'm not trying to like run you guys out of business with AI or anything, but it's a nice way to brainstorm all that stuff. And then whenever I get back, I've got the transcript of everything ready to go. So that's probably the biggest place. But yeah, I still do an awful lot of, for as much as I talk about AI, I still do an awful lot of human work.
Yes, I think we'll get into some of the things from the book, but honestly, as I finished reading the book last week and, looking through all of the different content in the chapters that you set up, it has a great logical flow to it. I think that is easily absorbable for teachers. But I think if we were to have you back on and you didn't have the book, I think we would be asking you about these same things anyway.
Yep.
Right?
So I might as well write a book about it, right?
Yeah, might as well write a book about it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and one of the things too, it's interesting to note that you've been working with students, and I'm just wondering, what have you seen this year as you've been knowing what you know about AI and you have the books and everything, and what has that been like translating into the classroom as far as what students are doing?
Yeah, there's so much that you could do with AI and that you could do with technology. And I think for me, one of the biggest things instructionally that I'm thinking about on a regular basis is, when do I use it and when do I not use it? Trying to get that balance is the big thing. And of course, if in the background, we've got this huge debate and dialogue going on in lots of spaces about screen time and about device use and all of that stuff. And I understand where they're coming from on lots of that, but I think it all definitely comes down to the teacher and trying to figure out, like, what's the best way to teach this particular lesson, to teach this particular topic so that students get this next step in the process. Is it, having them write something on paper? Cool, let's do that. Is it, are we going to all brainstorm together in a digital space? Are we going to do some sort of interactive digital activity? Am I going to get out the little mini whiteboards and have you just like do a whole bunch of little practice things? Are we going to do some turn and talks? Are we going to, it's like, there's all of these possibilities, all of these options, and they all have pros and cons to them. And I think that's the thing that gets sort of lost in that big debate. And really it just comes down to the, experienced educator that has practice in some of these things, or even if they're not experienced, just, trying things and figuring out what is good and what isn't, what do I like better than other things. And you're just making those value judgments on almost like a minute to minute basis. And that's one of the big things that I'm dealing with right now. In my work with Ditch That Textbook, I see lots of apps and lots of tools and lots of use cases and everything. And everybody wants to, talk about their new app or their new way of using AI and everything. And the teacher side of me is looking at that and going, will that help my students learn Spanish better than what I'm already doing? And that's a much higher bar for me. And I hope that, just educators in general are doing that for themselves, is that they see lots of possibilities, but they set the very high bar of, will this do better than what I'm already doing? So anyway, sort of a long-winded response to your question, but that's really one of the big things I think that I'm really trying to do as a teacher.
And has the school that you're currently working with, have they moved into like a higher phase of using AI as a district, which is probably difficult to answer because as you said, it's kind of up to the teacher, right? So it's probably most schools, you have some that are implementing it here and others that are just like, no, thank you, stay away from it. But have you seen any interesting use cases as you've like talked with other teachers or anything like that? Has it given you any new insights at all?
Yeah, at my school, it's exactly the way that you described it, David. It's, there's a spectrum, just like at any other school. I do lots of, professional development schools and school districts and stuff, and I see it everywhere that I go. You've got some of the high flyers that are doing, innovative, cool stuff and are trying lots of new things. And you got some folks that are sticking to their very traditional methods. And then they've got some stuff all in between. And, yeah, so our school is a lot like that. I've actually led some professional development here on some different AI tools that I thought are helpful. And so I know that at our school, we've got some teachers that are definitely using AI to help them lesson plan and brainstorm ideas and create resources. And so that's, sort of like that, some of those introductory steps into AI. But, in my class, we're doing some... We'll do some AI chatbots sometimes, where I'll have students read things, and then the chatbot will ask them like comprehension questions and stuff. I like to do a lot of that stuff whenever I'm not in class. It's a much better way, I think, to do sub plans because it gets students that immediate feedback. So anyway, we've got sort of a variety of that, and it sort of matches up, I think, with what I'm seeing across the board, and really to sort of do the second part of your question, some of the innovative things that I've seen out there, you've got teachers that are doing really neat things with image generation, with a lot of the immediate feedback stuff by integrating tools like Snorkel, and really there's some of them that are getting more into the student chatbots and having them do some like higher order things and doing some more, sort of more impressive prompts and all of that. But I still feel like, and maybe you've got thoughts on this too. I still feel like by and large, we're all still trying to figure out what this technology does and how it relates to teaching. And it seems like the teacher prep side of it is the easiest, most no-brainer implementation of it. But then with students, I think so many teachers have seen students that like will outsource the thinking. I was funny today in class, I only had about half of my students. And so I was actually sitting right here at my desk, and all my students are over here at their desks. And so I've got a class of 33, and I only had about 13 of them in class today. And so I heard, you hear things from the teacher desk, you hear things and they don't realize that you hear it. And I heard some of them talking about how there's this like sort of meaningless, pointless assignment. And they're like, yeah, I'm pretty much going to use AI to do that. And teachers have seen a lot of that, and that's one of the biggest hurdles. And I think maybe that's why they're a little nervous to dabble and jump into all of that, is because it's going to encourage kids to do more of that. But I think on the opposite, what it also does is it starts to set a culture of, this is how you use it responsibly. This is how it can actually be used to help you learn instead of bypass learning. I think we need more of that, but I think a lot of teachers are sort of hesitant to do it because they've seen, the shortcutting of the learning, the cognitive offloading, where students use the AI to do the thinking for them so that they don't have to think. And so anyway, those are, again, long-winded answer, sorry, but like that's some of the stuff that I'm seeing when it comes to all of that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to hear. And I think the point that you brought up that I really appreciate is that everybody is still trying to figure it out. And I think, I don't know what you think about this, but there's obviously a tension there, right? Like because you have on the one side, you have where everybody is saying, teachers, you need to make sure that you're opening these doors for students so that they don't have the consequences of being prepared for like these new jobs and new reality of AI and all that type of thing. But then they have their current reality of needing to assess students and having, making it so that they can assess them effectively. What do you think about that tension, or how that relates to where we're at? I mean, and you did give a little bit of an example there of the students that were talking about it, but do you see on the opposite side with that tension from outside, or like the things that they're hearing as far as the teachers are concerned? Do you think that's the biggest barrier, or are there other things that?
Yeah, related to that tension, one of the things that you just said, David, was you've got some of the folks that are saying, we need to be using this technology. We need to prepare them for the future. We don't want them to fall behind. AI is not going anywhere. I hear a lot of that from a lot of folks. But sometimes I've found that that's a hard sell for teachers because, they've got curriculum to teach and content to cover and everything. And they start to think, well, it's not my job to integrate technology. It's my job to teach. It's my job to teach kids stuff and everything. And I actually think that sometimes it gets a little bit manipulative by people to say, it's almost like they're trying to, in sort of a backdoor, indirect way, they're trying to force people to use more of a certain technology, whether it's helpful to teaching and learning or not. This isn't any of us, I don't think, but like I hear it in certain places where it's almost like, they really, really want you to use more of this technology, and it's almost sort of manipulative to say, oh, well, the kids are going to fall behind. We've got to prepare them for the future. Well, yes, to some extent, but also this, with AI specifically, it's going to change a ton just in the coming years, especially when a lot of our, like middle school and elementary school kids, whenever they graduate high school and graduate college, I mean, we're going to be 10 years into the future. And we've seen how much it's changed just since ChatGPT came out at the end of 2022. We've got like 3.5 years under our belt, and it's already adapted and changed so drastically. If we're preparing them for today's AI technology, we may not be preparing them for the reality that they're going to face. And so to me, I'm almost, I think we've got to have some of those basic AI literacies. We've got to have some of that basic understanding, how to use it, how not to use it. That's almost like more responsible use stuff than it is practical tutorials on how to use today's technology. And I even think maybe we're even best suited trying to prepare students with some of those problem solving and critical thinking skills, some of those analysis skills, grit and perseverance and being able to stick to it, and adaptability and everything. Because if this technology continues to change as we go forward, if we prepare them for today's technology, then we're preparing them for one of the most rudimentary versions of AI that they're going to see in their entire lives. And so whenever they actually get out into the real world, what's going to prepare them? Well, we can't prepare them for future technology that we can't even envision yet. But what we can prepare them for is to be able to solve problems and think critically and to adapt. If we're talking to them about those kinds of things now, then when they get out there and things have changed, they've got a set of skills that's actually going to prepare them for that. So I would honestly want to lean a little bit more on that. And actually, throughout my book, AI Literacy in Any Class, that a lot of it is really more towards thinking skills, towards critiquing, towards analysis, and it's that kind of stuff that I think is going to serve them better in the future than let's learn how to talk to today's chatbots. There's a little bit of that. I'm sort of like, making that, I'm sort of minimizing that a little bit. It's got some importance, but I think in general, if we really truly want to prepare students for this future, I think that some of those thinking skills, problem solving, analysis, critique, that kind of stuff, I think that's going to serve them more. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but that's the direction that I saw going when you asked it.
And those are essential skills in just being human.
Yes.
That regardless of AI or regardless of whatever teaching method a teacher chose to assign to a different lesson based upon what they were trying to accomplish. I think back to this. I'm dating myself here, but a long time ago, when I was in my social studies teaching methods class, kind of that one that you take right before you student teach, right? I remember being in that class and the instructor saying, you're going to have these times in class that are going to be teachable moments, that, something is going to pop up, something's going to happen, and you have to be willing to pivot, even just for a couple of moments, minutes, maybe 5 minutes, just to take advantage of that moment that you just couldn't, artificially create. You got to take advantage of it in the here and now. And so, I kind of was starting to put together the topics for what we're talking about here today. And this popped into my mind, and it relates back to your book. And I think you could see maybe the direction that I'm going with this. But by the way, did you know that AI sometimes suggests really bad questions for interviews?
Yep. That sounds like a by the way lesson.
It does, right?
Yeah. Like what you were talking about, that you have those sort of teachable moments. And, that's something, honestly, for me, that was sort of my very first aha moment into AI literacy. Because I'd heard people talking about AI literacy and how we need to prepare students for the realities of AI and everything. But I hadn't actually seen it in my own class until I was teaching Spanish 1. This was 2 years ago. I was teaching Spanish 1, and I was using an AI image generator. Can't remember which one it was I was using at the time. That was probably back in the days when I had a Mid-Journey subscription, because Google Gemini's AI image generator and ChatGPTs were not very good at the time. And so I had generated a bunch of these images that had lots of our vocabulary words in my Spanish class, to be able for students to be able to describe them. Because I always used to go out on Google Images and just go fishing for images, just hoping that I would find something that was usable. And now I can custom create images, which is amazing. It's
not even getting into the whole copyright of the images that you were maybe using.
That's true. Yes, that's right. Yeah, teachers have always had sort of a troubled relationship with copyright over time, I think. But But I started putting those images up there on the screen. And I remember one of them in particular came up. It was a picture of a pig playing basketball with a sheep. It's in my book. It's in the introduction, you know, it's that exact same picture. And I put it up there and the kids kind of like chuckled about it. And I saw that moment. It's just like what you were saying, Jeremy. It's one of those teachable moments. And I stopped and I was like, let's have a little bit of fun with this. And I said, okay, you all know this was made by AI, right? Yeah, it's obvious. I know. And I said, help me find the AI weirdness in this picture. And so they started looking and there's a ton of stuff. You know, the words on the animals' jerseys were weird and they weren't normal numbers. And the scoreboard was weird. And the lines on the floor were weird. And they just pointed all of this stuff out. And so I said, so you could tell that this was made by AI, right? And that was one of the very first. And then I was like, you know, by the way, you do know that if you make images with AI, a lot of times you can find these little artifacts is what they're called. And it helps you to figure out what's real and what's not. And that was my very first, by the way, lesson. That was my aha moment where I started to see AI literacy connecting to my Spanish class. It was that I had exposed students to something that was made by AI and we did our work with it. We did our Spanish work with it, but we also paused for just a second. Just like you said, Jeremy, it's one of those little teachable moments where you just pause and you take that moment, you know, take the bull by the horns for just a few moments. And we talked about AI. And that was my first by the way lesson, which is something that I talk about in the book, where you can have one of those little quick, you know, like 10, 20, 30 second observations that you make alongside your students. And that starts to teach them some AI literacy. And, you know, that's where it started to dawn on me that, you know, maybe AI literacy isn't best taught as a standalone class. Maybe it's best taught by equipping teachers with some AI literacy fundamentals and then just saying, hey, whenever you notice this, then bring it up in class. So
anyway.
Anyway.
I see it as like sprinkling a little bit of AI fairy dust, literacy components to it. But, you know, what I think is the other thing too here, and I know you touched on this earlier, is you know, teachers are constantly pressured to cover the content, to meet the standards. And if you were to, like you said, take a whole bunch of time out just to devote it a whole class period or a whole week to nothing but AI literacy training, you know, that's preventing the teacher from doing the things that they feel like they need to get done. So it makes it, you know, really approachable, I guess, for a teacher to be able to do that without derailing the rest of their class.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what I was trying to accomplish in the book, because, you know, here's sort of like the focus that I came to when it came to AI literacy. Because you hear, you know, there's, you know, stuff out of the government and you've got the tech CEOs and you got all the people in the media and, you know, all of our talking ed tech heads on LinkedIn and all of our social media. Everybody's got an opinion about AI literacy these days. And I came to it and I started thinking, you know, I've worked with all of these teachers in teacher workshops and at conferences and stuff over all these years. And I've gotten a pretty good feel for what they really want. And I thought they still need to teach. So how can we come at this AI literacy idea by empowering them to teach and actually making it easier for them to teach, but also helping their students to learn some little AI literacy fundamentals along the way. And that's where I got into the idea of, you know, let's have AI create some sort of, you know, make a hot take about something that we're learning or ask it some questions about what we're learning. And then let's analyze how it handled it and see what makes sense. One of the activities that I talk about in the book that I do in almost all of my AI trainings whenever I do workshops with teachers has to do with the Be the Bot activity, which, you know, is one of my very favorites. And it's something that really applies to just about you can use it in just about any class. And it's that idea of, you know, telling your students, hey, I'm going to ask AI this question related to whatever it is that we're learning. But first, I want you to try to anticipate what you think it's going to say. And so that puts them in the perspective of figuring out what AI is going to say. And if you've learned a little bit about how it responds, you're a little bit better to, you know, it's a little bit easier to do that. Of course, if they don't know how AI is going to respond, they could just make their own, you know, make their own list or make their own responses to it. Then you run the AI prompt, and then you can do compare contrast. And there's a lot of things that students can learn by looking at an AI response and analyzing it. And one of the things that teachers sometimes push back on a little bit is they say, yeah, but AI makes mistakes. It makes inaccuracies. It might put something up there that's wrong. Well, first of all, I'm not suggesting that we should have students' first exposure to a new topic be AI generated. They should still have, vetted resources. And so they're reading about it and learning about it someplace where it makes sense. But I would rather them see AI mistakes in a controlled setting like that. I want them to understand and to know that it will be inaccurate sometimes and that it'll do things a little differently than you might hope. So putting it up there like that and then just having them, go critique it and analyze it and say, what do you like about this? What's right about this? Is there anything that's unfair about this? Is there anything that's sort of biased or slanted about this and everything? And whenever they start to see that, it gives them concrete examples that this actually does happen in AI so that they're not just saying, oh yeah, it's going to be right all the time. Oh, AI is neutral. Oh, AI could do a better job than me. Like, no, that's not the case. So they get to see all of that stuff. But then secondly, it's developing this muscle that they start to develop over time, where if AI is sort of like integrated into anything, we need to analyze it. We need to critique it. There, I'm at a school. There's bells. Surprise, surprise. But we need to critique it. And if that's one of the habits that they build around AI, is that whenever I see it, I critique it. There's a saying that I bring up in the book over and over and over again: the ABC rule: always be critiquing. In sales, they say the ABC rule is always be closing. You always want to be closing on the sale. With me, I'm going always be critiquing. And whenever AI is brought up, you always critique. And if students get that habit, if they start to develop that habit over time, because we've done a little bit of this stuff all, throughout their entire educational career, then they're going to be that's going to be a set of skills that's going to really serve them going forward, I think.
So Matt, one of the things you brought up was the always be critiquing. Using that ABC acronym, the thing about with your example in the book, you had like the two jerseys. The book had the pigs or the pig and the sheep in the jerseys.
Yes.
And there was many problems there, right?
Yes.
So that's a really good insight into helping students understand how these systems cannot be trusted. And I think that as far as like usage for these tools, with that getting better, do you see anything where that's going to become more and more of a struggle for teachers and students, where it's like, because as you said, improvements are constant with these. We have these companies that are continuously working on upgrading these programs and everything. So what do you think is maybe, and maybe there's no answer to this, but what do you think would be like the next step or things we'll have to be aware of as those progressively get better?
Yeah, I'm glad you're thinking about this, because really the inaccuracies and the biases and everything, it's kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? It's like that's the easy thing to be able to spot a lot of times, is if it hallucinated or if it made a mistake. But then, like you said, David, the AI models are getting better and better. Like nowadays, whenever I generate images and I ask students, where's the AI weirdness, it's not as easy to do. So, as our technology evolves and improves, hopefully our AI literacy is starting to improve also. And so it really just becomes, I think, so to answer your question, I think one of the AI literacy questions that we can constantly be asking is not necessarily, well, I think we always want to be able to critique the AI output, but if the AI output looks pretty good, then it becomes the bigger question of how much do we use this? When do we use this? The balance question, I think that's definitely one that we can always have. In fact, I feel like schools are sort of like the perfect proving ground for getting this right before you get out into college and the workforce and everything. The hard part is that teachers hate it because it's the place where students can misuse it most easily. But I think it's a great place for us to be able to have those conversations if we're willing to have them. So I think student classwork and academic integrity and cheating and everything is a great way to talk about AI balance. Now, if you talk about AI balance, will you still have students misusing AI? Yes, it's still going to happen. But if we can at least talk about, how much is too much in this particular case? Can AI help us? If we use it too much, do we actually learn anything? And so having that classwork conversation, that sort of like responsible use conversation, there are a lot of kids where if you have that conversation with them, they start to see it in a little bit different light, because there's so many of them where they'll go from class to class to class and the teachers won't ever talk about it. And the only time that they ever really talk about it is if they're accusing a kid of misusing it. But if we've never talked about what misuse looks like and how we should live our lives and do our academic work in a place, in a world where AI really does exist, if we haven't had any of those conversations, then this might be the first conversation that you actually have with them. It's like getting it out into the open and everything. So I kind of took this on a little bit of a rabbit trail, David, but I think that's one of the directions that we go whenever that low-hanging fruit doesn't exist anymore. And honestly, if AI is hallucinating less, that's probably a good thing, because it means that it's going to be more useful technology to actually do things. And so then we get to those bigger discussions of how much do we use it and what's the purpose of school. And we want to have those conversations with students. But the other thing is, I think we need to have those conversations with teachers too. How does our practice evolve? Now that AI is available and it's actually happening, do we continue to do things the way that we've always done them? I'll give you an example. I'm taking a college class right now. So I'm a student taking a college class to maintain my dual credit certification to teach Spanish 3 still. And I'm taking this class, and so many of the activities that they're having us do, it's just like, read this chapter and answer these questions. And I'm like, can't we do better than this in the year 2026? Like, can't we do better than this? And so here's what I've found. It's been so fascinating being a student, being on the other end of this, is that I want to learn. I'm taking this class. It relates to the teaching of Spanish. And so I want to learn some things and I want to improve my practice. I also don't want to answer these sort of like mind-numbing questions that don't drive my learning forward. So here's what I've done. I've been kind of like subversive in a way where I'll use AI to answer the questions that I have to turn in, but then I'll turn around and I'll take the chapter and I'll throw it into NotebookLM and I'll make a podcast. Or I'll have it create an infographic that better explains some of the dense academic concepts in the book in a way that I can understand. I'll put it into Gemini and I'll get better explanations of what does this theory actually mean and how can I actually apply it in my day-to-day teaching in my class. It's almost like I'm redesigning the class the way that I want it. And as I've done that as a student, it's been fascinating to me as a teacher, as a trainer of teachers, to look at that and go, what is the future of learning? What is the future of teaching and learning here? Can we give students more agency? Can we give up a little bit more of the control to let them go and do those things? And for the people that want to seize the control and hold on to the control and everything, I would just ask them, do you think that students are using AI to do your work anyway? And if that's the case, we've kind of given up control anyway. So like, let's try something different. So anyway, I think there's lots of those conversations about how do we do learning? How do we handle our business? How do we balance and everything that I hope will be the better next questions whenever AI doesn't hallucinate as much, or it doesn't put 6 fingers on people's hands as much anymore. And it's almost like as the technology evolves, maybe our understanding and our literacy continues to improve and we need better questions as it goes. So David, I'm glad that you brought that up because that's something I'm thinking about a lot too.
Yeah, and it made me think about several different things. And I think I have a couple questions for you. One of them is, so navigating frameworks, right? Like one of the things that we see coming out a lot right now is we have a lot of organizations that are trying to work on AI frameworks for teachers to use,
Mhm.
which I think can lead to a lot of confusion as to like not only which ones to adopt, but also part of the problem, because AI is still so new, is we don't know if they actually work,
You're
right?
right. Yeah.
So can I just get just like real quickly get your opinion on the framework, like
Yeah.
all the things that are going on with frameworks that are being released?
Yeah. I have found, I'm so glad you brought this up. This annoys me to no end. All of these frameworks, everybody's got a framework. I actually created a framework early on, and then I just haven't used it for a while. Holly Clark and I adapted something. I can't even remember. It was the ACE framework, ACE. Everybody's got an acronym. You know, it's just like everything else in education.
Mhm.
One of the things I don't like. Okay, so David, you mentioned that a lot of them we don't know whether they're actually helpful or they actually do anything. Two, they're kind of one size fits all. And so if you're going to use a framework, why adopt somebody else's framework when you can adapt it a little bit better for what you need? Yeah, and it's just the frameworks. It's like it just I think my big issue with them is that they oversimplify things. They try to take everything into a neat like 4-step, 4 quadrants, 4 pieces, 4, a process or whatever. And teaching and life and learning and just like all of this stuff doesn't usually fit into a nice, neat framework like that. Honestly, I think if somebody wanted to do something great, we go very granular down to very specific things. Like come into my classroom and, watch me teaching, students how to learn verb tenses. And if we want to make a framework, let's do a granular framework around particular things that teachers do instead of a big picture, broad strokes, general purpose framework that's too broad for anybody to be able to use. That's probably a good place for me to stop because I could go on and on and on about this.
So as we look at those, like, so some of the things that have come out, I think are well-intentioned, like looking at AI literacy specifically, right? And how maybe you should approach like grade bands. So you have like K through 2, and obviously with those kids, you might just there might be an AI literacy opportunity where you just talk about what AI is. You're not like, it's not like you're having them use ChatGPT today, right? It's
Right.
and then it ramps up over the course of the different grade spans. But what I'm wondering is, what do you see as far as like real time, like actual classroom uses of AI in terms of we still have to teach the content. That's a huge piece. So then, but then there's the talk of, well, we have to teach AI literacy skills too. Where do you see the best way to join those two things together and have opportunities? Is it just like finding rare opportunities here and there to talk about these things, or is it like really intentional, like here's my curriculum map and here I'm going to lay out all these AI literacy opportunities within each of my units? Like, what do you think is the most realistic approach, I guess?
Yeah, I think you can do both, have sort of the serendipitous things that just happen. And I think that you can plan for it too. But, one of the things that I've seen that I really like the most is, and I don't think, and I think you brought this up, it's not just like asking students to do all of their work with ChatGPT. I don't think that's quite where we are, at least right now. Especially with a general purpose AI like ChatGPT that isn't, even if you've got learning mode and everything, I think a really great place to start is teacher-led AI. I'm a big fan of that. And a lot of my favorite examples are teacher-led. And I know in general, we want student-centered classes and we don't want, the teacher to be the sage on the stage and everything. But when the teacher uses it, then it's through the teacher's, trusted adult lens to make sure that whatever the AI is creating is appropriate for the students. But then the students don't need to necessarily be hands-on with it right away. So I'm a big fan of, let's have AI generate something. Let's put it up on the screen and let's discuss it. Let's have AI take the role of one of the characters in the novel that we're reading, and then let's analyze would the character actually say that. And so whenever we do that, students are getting to see AI outputs. It's done through the safe, sort of like the safe space, the safe environment of a classroom with a trusted teacher. And then the teacher can do can help them to analyze and critique and, to identify. The teacher can also help them to remember the role that AI plays in all of this. And there's a lot of that stuff where we can talk about the place and the usefulness of AI, the overreach of AI sometimes. I think whenever we do that, and you can do that all the way down, of course, it looks different. You mentioned grade bands earlier. I think it looks different in different scenarios. So, high school, middle school, even later elementary school, you can do some of the things that I discussed. But even in my book, there's a whole appendix at the end of the book where I talk about how teachers of primary grades can even set the scene for some of this stuff by just a couple of little small shifts. And I know sometimes people that this is an easy way to get people riled up on social media is to start talking about AI and the littles. And everybody will come after you and they'll be like, we don't want kids using AI when they're little. We don't want them, coding AI and talking to chatbots, and that's dangerous. And I'm going, that's not even what I'm talking about. I think especially with some of the primary grades kids, if you can start to set the scene or start to set the foundation of what's the appropriate relationship and role of technology with humans. So a couple of examples I always seem to come back with is if you do an AI generated image, maybe it's an image of you just did a book and you just read or did a read aloud and it had lots of illustrations in it and stuff. And you go, well, what might happen next? Now that this story is over, what might happen next? And you do an AI generated image of what that next step might look like. And you put it up on a screen where the kids can see it. And you say, hey, the computer made this for me. Just that simple statement right there, the computer made this for me, starts to open up this reality, even to littles, that humans make things, computers make things. There's a difference. And when you start to set the scene for some of those, basic fundamentals, then as they start to get a little bit older and they get into some of those older levels and you start to see some AI outputs and you're able to conceive of what do we mean by AI, they're better prepared for that. If you start to talk about what the computer does and what the computer should do and shouldn't do. I mean, if you wanted to force an AI literacy lesson with littles, if somebody gives a nice compliment, you could say, oh yeah, that's a really nice compliment. I bet that made them feel really nice. But it was something that you came up with yourself, that you said yourself, right? What if we had a computer make up a compliment? Would that feel as good as if your friend gave you a compliment? I mean, just like little things like that, where you start to see, where the humans come in and where the AI comes in and everything. Like, I think those are some of those differentiating factors where we can start to lay the foundation early, and then we continually start to build on it. And I think that's sort of how, hopefully I would rather see that kind of stuff in place than let's throw kids onto chatbots and have them do a whole bunch of activities. I would rather talk about the factors at play when you use AI instead of use more AI. I think that's a better way. That's really sort of the definition of AI literacy to me.
I really like that example that you just gave about the compliment,
Yeah.
because it reminds me of a couple of different things. One, I think it really centers the whole conversation about AI on the human side of things and how humans feel about whether AI is involved or not involved. So you're building that empathy, I think, with the kids, even at the littlest levels. You just gave a great example of that. But also it comes from teachers actually knowing their students, which is, if you really want to reach a student, no matter what you're going to teach them, you first have to build that relationship, that rapport with them before you can really get into anything else. Yeah. And I think it also kind of reminds me of, well, David and I were at the COSIN conference a couple of weeks ago. And one of the keynote speakers that they had, Michael Jabber, had this quote here, and I want to get your take on it here because I think it leads us to, some other areas here that we talk about, taking shortcuts in your learning. But he said, think before you ask AI, or AI's thoughts will become yours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it does relate a little bit to your be the bot activity too.
It does. Uh-huh. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. The thing that whenever I do workshops about any of this stuff, that's one of the keys is human thinking before AI, which I think is super important, especially on the educational level. I'll play the keynote speaker game with you for a second, because I went to the FETC conference a couple of years ago when Guy Kawasaki was the keynote speaker. Guy Kawasaki of the old Apple Macintosh days and everything. And he comes up with this like keynote speech where it's like 12 things that I want teachers to know about AI or something. It's a whole bunch of like little tidbits and everything. And one of the things he said in those was he said, if I need to write a letter or something, I just let AI write a draft of it for me. And then I'll look at it and I'll see what I want to make, what adjustments I want to make. And then I'll send it off. And I was like, man, you just lost the whole room. Mm-hmm. You're in a room full of a whole bunch of teachers who want kids to think instead of let AI do the thinking for them. And that was an example of just like what you said, this speaker says that, do the human thinking first, or otherwise the AI thoughts become your thoughts. You want that precious, sacred human thinking to happen first. And that's exactly why I developed the Be the Bot activity the way that I did. And, and it works with anything. And really all it is it's just good, solid, face-to-face human teaching and learning, but it adds an extra little layer of AI afterwards, that it's something that you can compare and contrast, that you can critique afterwards. So yeah, I think that's huge. And it also goes back to the bigger picture idea that I think is really important going forward into the future, which is to develop those important thinking skills, those sort of like timeless human thinking skills that teachers have been teaching for decades, for centuries. You go all the way back to the, philosophers. You go back and you read Plato, and it's like, you've got the Socratic method, and, like all of that stuff is all rooted in solid human thinking. And that's really what's going to serve us, I think, going forward. And so, yeah, it plays into the importance of the human in learning. AI can assist, AI can augment, but you got to do that thinking first, or otherwise, just like you said, just like that speaker said, or otherwise the AI thoughts become your thoughts. And there's only one, I'm going to say, I've never said this before, so I might be off on this, but it feels right in the moment. There's only one entity that can do the thinking at a time. It's either going to be the human or it's going to be the AI. And whoever does it first, whoever does the thinking first is the thinking that gets kept. I don't know. I like where you're going with that, and it fits very nicely into what I believe about teaching and learning in the place of AI also.
Right. And I think teachers can latch onto that too, and they can model how they're using AI. And if they talk about how they're putting their own ideas in first, and then having AI come in and polish up some of the work that they did, or maybe encourage them to consider different angles that they weren't considering before, that it still then is going to be that learning that's going to be owned by that human, that individual. And I think being open and honest and transparent about that with their students, right, is going to allow students to see, okay, my teacher's using this to help them benefit their own instruction. Can I use it in a way that will benefit my learning without it becoming a shortcut?
Yeah. Yeah. What you just said there, I think, is really important. There's that transparency. And whenever teachers are transparent about how they're using it, students get to learn something about how a trusted adult is actually using this technology. The other side of this too, that I think is hard, that we've got to be very explicit with kids about, is that AI use doesn't have to be fair and equal between the teacher and the student. Actually, I want to come back to that in a second, because there's a place where I think that it should. But we have to remember that the end goal here is for students to learn. And so there are places where if students use it, it's going to shortcut their learning and they're not going to develop. And it's hard for kids to understand that sometimes, because they see the teacher in the room and the students in the room, and they feel like everybody's here to work, but it's not really the case. The case is for us to create the environment for the students to flourish, for them to learn. Like if you're watching the video, I just made my flowers, my flowers growing out of with my hands, that's the goal. The goal is, with the, if you're trying to plant flowers, the goal is to create the environment. And Sir Ken Robinson used this metaphor before that, the goal is not to paste petals onto a stem. That's not our job as humans. It's to create the conditions so that they will flourish. And if the teacher uses AI to help create those conditions, then the conditions are met. But the students see it a lot of times as, I'm doing the work, you're doing the work. We've got to do a fair. It's like putting us all on the same level. We're not on the same level. The idea is that students come in not knowing how to do something, and by the end of the class, they know how to do something. And if all we're trying to do is create equality, it's like if students if they don't think about it, if they don't know any better, they start to see it as, that doesn't seem fair. Well, fairness isn't the goal. Learning is the goal. Now, I mentioned earlier that I want to come back to that a little bit because, there are certain places where I think that if we're not careful about that, the imbalance, somebody's using it more than others. Oh, that's not fair. Like that can start to hurt relationships. It makes me think of, like feedback on student writing. Is that if a student takes all this time and they do their, they pour their heart and soul out onto the paper, and they do their very best work, and then the teacher uses AI to provide feedback and to grade it, and they don't even look at it. There's this feeling of everybody doing pulling their weight, of doing their best, of showing up as a human. So there is sort of a balance where everybody shows up and has to participate. The teacher that doesn't, read students' work and provide meaningful feedback and actually try to do their part, and they're not using their highly qualified expertise in the subject matter and the teaching and everything. If they're not using that, and then the student feels, sort of shortcutted. It's just like when the students shortcut their learning, so there's sort of a balance there, I think. But anyway, when it comes to that whole concept of what are we using it for and how much is too much and everything, it applies to the students and the teachers, but just in different ways sometimes, I think.
Yeah, I can completely understand where you're coming from with that. I want to get to one more part of the book, and it's actually kind of throughout the book. That was probably my favorite part. Were the prompt and ponder segments that you had at the end of each chapter. And if you picked up Matt's book and you just read through and you're like, oh, I can just envision what that would be like. Don't. I mean, actually take the picture of the page, put it into your favorite LLM, and actually go through what it has you do. Because I think what really, really helped me fully grasp each chapter was to be able to reflect on it and to have that chatbot really kind of help guide me through my own understanding. And really what it did is it helped build capacity of my own understanding of AI literacy as well. And, you talked a little bit too about how it's not just important for students to pick up on AI literacy, but teachers as well. So I don't know if that was intentionally part of your thing, was to subtly give teachers those lessons in AI literacy, but they really work.
Yeah. It was one of those things where at first I was like, oh, that might be a cool idea. And then the more that I thought about it and the more that I tried it, the more things that I liked about it. So at first it was just like a fleeting thought, but I sort of did the same thing as you. And, like little by little, the more that I did it, the more that I liked it. So the prompt and ponder is a part at the end of each chapter where you can take a picture of a prompt. It's like a pre-written prompt. You can take a picture of it and then throw it into ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude or whatever you're using. And I think the words that I tell you to use is "let's do this." Mm-hmm. And so then it looks at the picture, it looks at the prompt, and then it leads you through, sort of like a guided reflection of that previous chapter, and it helps you generate ideas specific to your position, specific to whatever you're teaching, specific to whatever your role is in education and everything. And I sort of thought, and that concept came out of workshops that I've been doing, where I've thought, since AI is so adaptive, I don't have to come up with all of the ideas anymore. It used to be I would do a tech workshop on student engagement with tech. And I'd say, and if you teach this, you could do it this way. And if you teach this, you could do it this way. And you could teach this way, you could do it this way. And I've had people come up during the breaks and be like, I don't teach any of those things. What if I teach music? What if I teach fourth grade? What if I teach social studies? And I'm like, well, I don't teach social studies. Well, I don't teach music, but let's try to like brainstorm some things. And now you don't have to do that anymore because you can do that work with AI. And like you said, Jeremy, it's building their AI literacy. It goes back to that, that rule that Ethan Mollick suggests in his book, Co-Intelligence. He says, if you want to know what AI is capable of and how to use it, give it 10 solid hours. Work with it, do your just like normal tasks, ask it about things for 10 hours. And the more that you interact with it, the more that you'll see what it's capable of and how it works and everything. You'll learn a lot just by doing things with it for 10 hours. And so that's all I'm trying to do, is trying to set them up for success by having these guided conversations with AI about things and trying to build towards that 10 hours. So that's sort of like a side thing, but I really wanted to be able to, it sort of changed the way that I look at books, the way that I look at courses and the workshops that I do, and just training in general, is that if I can create a prompt that teachers can use that will help them personalize it to their own situation, I don't have to brainstorm all of that stuff anymore. The LLM the AI can help me do that. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And really anybody that's listening to this, if you're the one that creates a prompt for your students in the classroom, or if you serve teachers in some capacity or something, if you kind of create a prompt for them, you set them up for success. And you give them an opportunity to personalize things a little bit themselves. So that really was one of the big aha moments that I've had in the last couple of years with all of the training work that I do across a variety of mediums.
Yeah, and I like that concept a lot, because I think that as as teachers are going to be reading the book and checking out that prompt and ponder activity, the nice thing about that is that should be something that they could translate as an idea to working with students too, and help them to practice that same thing, and really reflect on what they've used it for and how they've built a prompt or different things like that. So yeah, I really appreciate that aspect of it too. So I don't know if you have anything to add there too, but just the translation over to students, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think you can, that's one of the nice things about so many of these K-12 AI platforms that have student-facing chatbots, is that you can set the guardrails and you can set the instructions and everything. And so what I did in the book was the adult version, where I've got the prompt, and because you're 18 plus and you are subject to the terms of use of the app, you can just go plug that into the AI app of your choice. But with students, you can plug those same types of instructions into one of the student chatbots, like your Brisk Boost, your Magic School's Magic Student, School AI Spaces. You plug it into one of those and they can have those conversations. And so again, you're just setting them up for success. But if all we're doing is just giving them the chatbot and letting them just like interact with it, we're missing out on the AI literacy opportunity to afterwards go reflect on it and say, how did the AI handle its business there? Was there anything that it did that was weird? Do you wish that it did something better? Here are my instructions that I gave it, how could I have done the instructions better that would have given a better outcome? Those are the little things that still keep us thinking about the content of the day, but also teach students and teachers really a little bit about AI literacy. So it's like that idea of integrating AI literacy. I know for a lot of us that have been talking about digital citizenship and like digital literacy in general and everything, we've been talking about how it should be integrated into the day-to-day classroom, and it's a lot of times it's a losing battle, unfortunately. But I'm hopeful, maybe I'll be the optimist that hopes that maybe it'll catch on with AI literacy here, and maybe it'll maybe we'll be able to get through to some students and help prepare them for this sort of AI saturated future that they're gonna face.
Great. I love the optimistic tone here,
yeah.
right? So now let's our time is winding down here, and one of the things that David and I have been doing here a little more recently here. So I know we didn't do this episode 1, I know, but
Okay.
we've developed some lightning round questions that we throw in at the end just to get to know the guest a little bit more personally here. So feel free to respond, take it whatever direction you want. If it's a one-word answer, that's great. If you want to expound, that's entirely up to you here. So we've got a few of those, and I'm going to give it to David to kick us off with the first one.
Yeah, this is an easy one. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be when I graduated high school, I studied journalism. So I wanted to be a newspaper editor or a newspaper reporter. Before that, there was a time where I wanted to be a computer programmer. But when I was little bitty, I would see the guys show up on the garbage trucks. And I thought it was so cool that they like hung on the side of the garbage truck. And so my very first thing that I wanted to be, I think, was a trash collector. So it's evolved a lot over the years.
So then what was the first job you ever had?
Let's see. I mean, aside from like cutting the grass for my dad, I worked at Burger King. I worked fast food. I learned a lot of important life lessons about working fast food. And probably the most important one was, I don't want to do this my whole life. So I need to go get an education.
Well, we're not quite to fully AI generated movies yet, but what's your current guilty pleasure TV show or movie?
Oh gosh. There's so many. My wife and I, we're the worst when it comes to TV. We watch a lot of TV as we're winding down at night, and we always go back to the same stuff that we've watched. We'll like rewatch things, So, we've watched every episode of House like 2 or 3 times. We've seen Bones. There's Person of Interest, which was really good. That one was actually about AI. So it was fascinating to watch that recently. We just got done rewatching every episode of Seinfeld. So it's like a lot of those things that we know are good. So it's like, we just feel like there's a lot of trash on TV anymore that we don't like. So we don't want to be disappointed. We just go back to the things that we know that we like.
What's the best meal you've ever had? Was it something you made, or was it out at a restaurant somewhere?
Oh gosh. I don't know how I can answer that. I'll just say the best meal I've had recently, I got to have fresh pasta in Italy. My daughter and I went on a school tour of Italy and Greece. It was one of those EF tours. And so we were in Italy for 5 days and Greece for 3 days. And the food there was fantastic. But we had, actually, I'll do you one better. In Greece, we had authentic Greek gyros at the foot of the Acropolis. So that one was not necessarily just the food, but it was the company and the view, because we could actually see the Acropolis from the from the restaurant where we were eating. So maybe that one was the best.
Nice. What's something people would be surprised to know about you?
Oh goodness. Surprised to know about me. I don't know. I mean, I like sports in general. I mentioned earlier, I'm a runner. I play disc golf with my son. I'm big into basketball. Yeah, I didn't play basketball in high school, but my family is, or my wife's family, they're like incredible basketball players. We've got, like my father-in-law and his brother and like a couple of their kids were all scored 1,000 points in high school. So I learned how to be good at basketball after I graduated high school and college, because if I was going to play pickup ball with my family, I was way behind and I need to get better at it. So there's something, I guess.
Maybe if you're going to be at ISTU, we could get a round of disc golfing together. I'm a big disc golf fan. So
really, okay, I've already got some plans. I'm probably going to have discs with me. So let's side chat on that in the coming months. I would love to do that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You might have to show me how to play so I can tag along.
Yep.
Okay, deal. It's a plan.
What's your keynote walk-up song?
Oh, I've actually had to do this. One that I really like just because of the emotion that it evokes. There's the The Greatest Show from the soundtrack of The Greatest Showman. It's like that main one, the one that goes da 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 boom boom, like that song. There's like parts of that I think are fantastic for a walk up.
All right, last bit here. This or that. These are quick fire, so you have to pick one. First one that
I'm terrible at this, by the way, at answering short, so I'll try to be short on these.
Okay, early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Road trip or flight?
Flight.
Cook at home or eat out?
Yes. No, I mean probably eat out if I'm being honest.
Okay, text or call?
Call always.
All right. Mountains or beach?
Mountains.
Every time, Jeremy. Every time.
I know. I'm losing that one. I'm telling you. I'm beach.
My son like loves the mountains, and he's like, I get sand everywhere. I don't know what to do with the beach. If I'm in the mountains, I go hike. It's easy. I'm sort of the same way.
Here's the last one. Last one to leave the party or first one out the door?
First one out the door. Unfortunately, that's me.
All right.
Well, perfect. Thank you again, Matt. It's been really enjoyable to have you on as a guest for the second time and to catch up with you and to have you share all the insights about your book. We'll make sure to plug the book in the description in the show notes. Is there anything else that you have coming up that you would like to give a shout out to or to promote?
Yeah, actually, we just launched. So if you go to ditchthattextbook.com, if you're not familiar, you can see like all of the stuff that we've got going on. And the email newsletter is the big thing that we do, that we try to provide lots of good free value for teachers. You can join that at ditch.link/join. But through the newsletter, we just recently launched a new community. And so it's like an online community with discussion boards and live streams and stuff like that. I've been doing email newsletters for the longest time, and it feels like it's just one-way communication. And I wanted something that would bring in everybody's voices. So this is something we just started with in the last few weeks or so. So if you join the newsletter, ditch.link/join, there's always links to join the community. And it's been really fun to see, just in a short amount of time, our community is already over 1,500 people. Not all of them are actually like regularly participating, but we've had that many join, and we've had really good discussions that I've gotten to jump in on and everything, that some people are just starting on their own. I know since Twitter sort of died as a way for educators to stay together, not as many people are doing it. I think a lot of folks are looking for places to go. And we just wanted to create another one of those places where people could go and meet other educators and discuss the things that are on their mind, share what's working and everything. And this community has been really fun. So anyway, if you're not familiar, you can join the newsletter at ditch.link/join. And then just in those email newsletters, there are links to join the community. And, we highlight some of the things that people are talking about and everything. And that's been really fun.
Perfect. Well, we look forward to catching up with you again here soon.
Yes, me too. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.